I still remember the exact sound the cabin door made when I stepped outside. That soft click, barely louder than a whisper, like the house itself was trying not to wake him. It was supposed to be the best birthday of my life. My husband had planned everything, 3 nights in a rented cabin up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just the 2 of us. No cell service worth mentioning, no work emails, no obligations. He'd even packed my favourite wine, a bottle of Malbec I'd mentioned once, months ago in passing, and when I saw it sitting on the kitchen counter when we arrived, wrapped in brown butcher paper with a little handwritten tag that said, "For my girl," I actually teared up. I'm embarrassed to admit that now, but I did. His name is Caspian. I know, it's a name you don't forget. I used to love that about him, the way everything about him felt slightly different from ordinary. We'd been married 4 years at that point, together for 7. I was 31. I'd spent my entire adult life building something with this man. A home, a savings account, a future that I could actually picture. We met in grad school in Asheville. He was getting his MBA, I was finishing a master's in education policy. We were both broke, both exhausted, both eating too much ramen and not sleeping enough. We fell in love over bad coffee and worse study sessions, and I genuinely thought, that I had found the person I was going to grow old with. We bought a house in Charlotte 3 years into our marriage, a pale blue craftsman bungalow with a porch swing, and a yard that needed work, and a kitchen we immediately hated and immediately started renovating. I put in $60,000 of my own savings, money I'd inherited from my grandmother, for the down payment. Caspian handled the mortgage paperwork, the insurance policies, all the administrative stuff I never had the patience for. He was good at that. Detail-oriented, thorough. I see now exactly how thorough. The cabin was his idea from the start. He'd suggested it 2 months before my birthday, sent me the Airbnb link with a voice memo attached. "Look at this place. Tell me you don't want to spend your birthday here." The photos showed a stone fireplace, a wraparound deck, and a view of the Appalachians that looked fake, like a screensaver. I told him it was perfect. I told him I loved him. I meant both things. We drove up on a Thursday afternoon. The last hour of the drive was winding mountain road with no guardrails, and I had my bare feet up on the dashboard, the window cracked, music playing low. I remember feeling so settled, so sure of my life. That first night we cooked pasta together and drank half the Malbec and fell asleep by the fire. It was exactly what I needed, exactly what I thought it was. Friday was slower. We hiked a short trail in the morning, came back muddy and laughing, showered, read for most of the afternoon. Around 4 o'clock he said he needed to make a few work calls. Bad signal in the cabin. He was going to walk down the gravel road a bit, to get a better connection. I told him to take his time. I was reading a novel I'd been trying to finish for 3 months. He was gone about 40 minutes. When he came back he seemed lighter, almost giddy, which I remember thinking was odd after a work call, but I didn't examine it. We opened the second bottle of wine, a Pinot he'd brought, and he made dinner, steaks, roasted potatoes, those asparagus spears I love. It was beautiful, candlelight and everything. After dinner he mixed me a cocktail, an Aperol Spritz, which is my favourite warm weather drink. He made a whole production of it, fishing the Aperol out of his bag, pouring the Prosecco with a little flourish, adding the orange slice. He handed it to me with both hands like he was offering something precious. "Happy birthday, baby," he said. I took the glass and walked out onto the deck. The view at dusk from that deck was extraordinary. The mountains went purple and then grey, and the sky above them was doing something I don't have words for, orange bleeding into pink, bleeding into a deep, bruised blue. I wanted to photograph it. I held my drink in one hand and pulled out my phone with the other, trying to find an angle that captured even half of what I was seeing. That's when I heard him through the window behind me. The sliding glass door was only open about 6 inches. He must not have realised I was still on the deck, or maybe he thought I'd gone around to the front. His voice was low, but the mountain air carries sound in strange ways, bouncing it off surfaces you wouldn't expect, and I heard every word. "It's done. I made it tonight. A pause while the other person spoke. Yeah, the full amount, same as we talked about. Another pause. I know what I'm doing, Trish. I've been researching this for 2 months. This isn't something that shows up on a standard tox screen. It degrades in the bloodstream. My hand went completely still. By the time anyone thinks to look, there won't be anything to find. She'll be gone, and it'll look like she had a cardiac event. She has that arrhythmia thing. It's documented. It fits. He laughed quietly, like he was proud of himself. 3 million, maybe more after the property, and we can finally stop hiding. I stood there on that deck, holding my Aperol spritz, looking at the most beautiful sunset I'd ever seen, and understood that my husband had just told someone on the phone that he was going to kill me. My first instinct was to drop the glass. My second was to scream. I did neither. I don't know how to explain what happened in my body in that moment. It was like everything slowed down and sped up simultaneously. My hands were shaking, but my mind went very, very quiet. Quieter than I've ever felt before. Like something primal and cold took over and pushed all the noise out. I thought about the arrhythmia comment. He was right, that it was documented. I'd been diagnosed with a mild arrhythmia 3 years earlier. Totally manageable, never symptomatic. But it was in my medical file. Something that, in the wrong context, could look like a risk factor. I thought about the $3 million. I thought about the life insurance policy he'd handled the paperwork for 18 months ago, when he'd said it made sense to increase our coverage now that we had the mortgage. I'd signed where he told me to sign. I hadn't read every page. I thought about the phone call he'd taken that afternoon, walking down the gravel road, coming back giddy. I thought, how long has this been the plan? And then I thought, I have maybe 45 seconds before he comes looking for me. I moved very carefully. I turned so my back was to the window. I set my cocktail glass down on the deck railing with both hands, making sure it didn't tip. Then I reached into the pocket of my cardigan for my phone, which I'd already had out for the photos, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. I did not go back inside. I stood at that railing and I listened. He was still on the phone. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's in a great mood. Pause. Because it's her birthday, Trish, that's the whole point. People don't question grief when there was a celebration the night before. It looks worse if anything seems off. Pause. I told you, it's not traceable at the dosage I used. I've done everything right. He used the past tense. I used, not I will. He'd already put it in the drink. I looked at the glass sitting on the railing in front of me. Pretty, fizzy, that perfect shade of orange. I picked it up, walked to the edge of the deck, and poured it off the side into the dark below. Then I set the empty glass back on the railing. I kept recording. He talked for another 4 minutes. I know because when I stopped the recording later, it was 4 minutes and 17 seconds long. I got almost all of it. The insurance payout, the property value in Charlotte, the woman named Trish he'd apparently been seeing for over a year, their plan to move to Colorado, the specific detail that he'd sourced something he called a glycoside compound from a contact he'd made in a chemistry forum online. He talked about it with the casual confidence of someone who had gone over the plan so many times it had stopped feeling real to him. He also at one point said, "She trusts me completely. That's the whole thing. She always has." When he finally ended the call, I heard him moving around inside the cabin. I had maybe 15 seconds. I stopped the recording, sent the audio file to my email. The Wi-Fi in the cabin was patchy, but it went through, and then airdropped it to my cloud backup as a second copy. Then I put my phone in my pocket, picked up my empty glass, and walked back inside with what I hope looked like a normal expression on my face. "Hey," he said, looking up from the kitchen counter. "You good? You've been out there a while." "I was watching the sunset," I said. "It was incredible." "Yeah." "Yeah." I held up the empty glass. "Finish my drink. Can I get some water?" He got me water. He didn't look at me differently. He had no idea. We watched a movie that night from the pull-out couch in front of the fire. He fell asleep before it ended, which was normal for him. I lay there next to him, listening to him breathe, watching the fire die down, and I did not sleep at all. I spent that night planning. The next morning, Saturday, my actual birthday, I told him I wanted to hike the longer trail we'd looked up when we first arrived, the one that looped around the ridge. He seemed pleased. He packed a small day pack with water and snacks and sunscreen. We drove the 10 minutes to the trailhead and started walking. About 40 minutes into the hike, at a section where the trail widened near a lookout, I stopped and said my ankle felt tight. I told him to go on ahead to the overlook. I'd stretch it out and catch up. He hesitated for about 3 seconds, then went. The moment he was out of sight, I called my sister, Delphine. She's a paralegal, not a lawyer, but she knows people who are, and she keeps her head better than anyone I've ever met. When I told her what I'd heard, playing her 15 seconds of the recording so she knew I wasn't imagining things, she was silent for 5 full seconds. Then she said, "Okay. Don't drink or eat anything he gives you for the rest of this trip. Don't tell him anything. And when you get home, go directly to an attorney before you go home. Do you understand me?" I told her I understood. She texted me the name of a family law attorney in Charlotte who she trusted. She also told me to email the audio file to that attorney's office with a brief summary, which I did right there on the trail, thumbs moving as fast as they could, one eye on the path ahead for any sign of Caspian coming back. When he reappeared around a bend in the trail, I was sitting on a rock with my legs stretched out, looking for all the world like a woman with a mildly tight ankle. "Better," he said. "Getting there," I said. We drove home Sunday morning. He was warm the entire drive, attentive. He stopped at a gas station and got me a coffee exactly how I like it, oat milk, 1 sugar, and handed it to me with a smile. I thanked him. I drank it. I'd gotten it directly from a sealed machine and watched him do nothing to it. I thought about what he'd said on the phone. She trusts me completely, that's the whole thing. I thought about how he had learned over 7 years exactly how I liked my coffee. I thought about what it means to study someone that carefully for that long and decide to use what you know to destroy them. We got home around noon. He carried our bags inside. I told him I needed to run to the pharmacy, that I thought I was getting a sinus thing. He said he hoped I felt better. He kissed my forehead. I drove straight to the attorney's office. Her name is Veronica Ashby, and she is one of the sharpest people I have ever sat across from in my life. I told her everything. I played her the recording in full. She listened without interrupting, and then she said in a very even voice, "This is a criminal matter. Before we do anything with the divorce, this recording goes to law enforcement today. Do you agree?" I told her I agreed. She called a contact at the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department while I sat in the chair across from her desk. Within 2 hours, I was giving a formal statement. They took the audio file, had me walk through the timeline twice, and asked me about the insurance policy, the property, everything Caspian had mentioned on the call. They already knew what a glycoside compound was. One of the detectives told me, without drama, that I was very lucky. I know. They asked if I could go somewhere else that night rather than back to the house. I said yes. I went to Delphine's. They arrested Caspian 4 days later. The forensic team had gone over everything he'd purchased in the months before the trip: supplements, online chemistry forums, a purchase from an overseas vendor that he'd made through a personal email account he created separately from the one I knew about. The compound he'd used was real. Toxicologists confirmed that the amount he'd described in the recording, the dosage that degrades in the bloodstream, was in fact lethal in the right quantity and would have been difficult to detect in a standard cardiac workup if no one was specifically looking. They were looking. The woman he'd been on the phone with, Trish, was a woman he'd met at a conference in Atlanta 14 months before my birthday. She'd known about the plan. She was interviewed, and the case against her is still moving through the system. Caspian's attorney tried to argue the recording was manipulated. The forensic audio analysis said otherwise. He pled guilty 8 months later to attempted murder and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. His sentencing is scheduled for later this year. I filed for divorce the same week as his arrest. The house in Charlotte, the one I put $60,000 of my grandmother's money into, is currently in litigation. My attorney is confident his assets have been frozen and the court is well aware of what he was trying to do. I have had people ask me, and I understand why they ask, why I didn't confront him on the deck that night. Why I stood there and made small talk and watched a movie and went home like nothing had happened. The honest answer is that I was terrified and I was alone on a mountain with him, and I had 4 minutes of audio on my phone that was worth more than anything I could have said to his face in that moment. Confrontation would have given him the chance to explain it away, or destroy the evidence, or do something I can't predict. Silence gave me everything. I also have people ask me whether I'm angry. The anger comes in waves, usually at night. It arrives in specific, strange shapes, not at the dramatic stuff, not at the poison or the phone call or the conspiracy. It arrives at the small things, the handwritten tag on the wine bottle, the coffee with oat milk and 1 sugar, the way he said "Happy birthday, baby" with both hands on the glass, the 7 years of details he collected like evidence, all of it used in the end to make me trust him. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had studied me. What he didn't account for was that I had been paying attention too. I'm 32 now. I'm living in a rental on the east side of Charlotte, closer to Delphin than I've been since we were kids. I started a new job in January. I sleep fine, mostly. I still like Aperol spritzers, and yes, I still order them, and no, I don't think about it every time, just most times, and honestly, I think that's allowed. There's something nobody tells you about surviving something like this, which is that the story doesn't feel survivable while it's happening. Standing on that deck in the dark, listening to my husband explain how I was going to die, I did not feel brave. I felt like ice. I felt like if I moved wrong or breathed wrong, the whole thing would collapse. But I had my phone, and I had my sister on speed dial, and I had, somewhere underneath all of it, the sense that I was not going to let him be right about me. She trusts me completely. That was his plan. Trust was the whole mechanism. He was right that I trusted him. He was wrong about what I'd do when that trust broke. What I keep coming back to, even now, more than a year later, is that Caspian never thought I was capable of what I did. And I think that says everything. He spent 7 years studying me. He knew how I liked my coffee, what wine I reached for first, what made me cry at movies when I'd stop asking questions. He catalogued every soft edge of who I was and decided that softness was the same thing as weakness. He mistook my trust for blindness. He mistook my warmth for a gap in my armor. That miscalculation cost him everything. I thought a lot about what actually saved me that night on the deck. It wasn't luck, though luck was part of it. The window cracked just enough, the mountain air carrying sound in ways he didn't account for. But what actually saved me was that I didn't panic. I stood there with a poisoned drink in my hand, and I made a decision. I was not going to let fear run the next 4 minutes. I was going to think. That kind of thinking doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from years of paying attention, of taking things seriously, of not outsourcing your own judgment to someone else just because they told you to. I had signed documents I didn't read because I trusted him. I had not looked closely at the insurance policy because I trusted him. And I will carry that as a lesson for the rest of my life, that love is not a reason to stop thinking. Trusting someone and verifying what they tell you are not opposites. You can hold both at the same time. What I did on that deck, turning my back to the window, opening the voice memo app, keeping my hands steady, that wasn't bravery in any dramatic sense. It was just clarity, a decision to take the evidence seriously and move carefully, to not let the shock of what I was hearing override the part of me that knew what to do next. I think that clarity is something you can build in yourself, over time, if you're paying attention to the world instead of just moving through it. And then there's Delphine. I called her from a hiking trail with my hand shaking, and she gave me the 2 things I needed most: someone who believed me without question, and someone who knew what the next step was. I could not have done any of this without her. I want to be that for someone else someday, the person who picks up the phone and doesn't say, "Are you sure?" before they say, "I'm here." Caspian's plan failed not because of one thing, but because of three. He underestimated my character, he underestimated my judgment, and he underestimated my willingness to stay steady when everything in me wanted to fall apart. Character, judgment, steadiness, those three things together, not any one of them alone. That's what got me out of that cabin and into Veronica's office and through the last 14 months. I don't think the world operates on some invisible ledger of punishment and reward. I don't believe that. But I do believe that the choices you make, compounded over time, tend to catch up with you. Caspian made 1,000 small choices that led him to that phone call. I made 1,000 small choices that led me to hit record. Neither of us arrived at that deck by accident.